The hospital slap and the beginning of the fall. Those words hit me harder than the truck that put me in that hospital bed. Pay rent or get out. My father stood over me, his face red with rage, while the stitches on my forehead were still fresh and the pain medication barely dulled the throbbing in my ribs. I was barely holding myself together, both physically and mentally. When I told him I could not pay, he struck me. The slap was so hard that I fell to the floor, tasting blood in my mouth and feeling something crack in my chest. He sneered at me, accusing me of thinking I was better than the family. What he did not know was that this moment would become the turning point of his life and mine. My name is Quanah Graves. I am 29 years old, and this is the story of how my own father tried to destroy me at my lowest point, and how his greed ultimately became his downfall. The accident had happened 3 days earlier. A drunk driver ran a red light and crashed into the driver's side of my car. The doctors said I was lucky to be alive. I had 3 broken ribs, a concussion, 27 stitches across my forehead, and bruises so severe I looked like I had gone several rounds with a professional boxer. The other driver's insurance company tried to deny full coverage, claiming I was partially at fault. That was impossible. I had been completely stopped at the light when he hit me. But to understand why my father reacted the way he did, you need to understand who he was. Donald Graves never saw me as his daughter. He saw me as a source of income. After my mother died when I was 14, I started paying my own way. At first it was small things, using babysitting money for lunch or school supplies. By the time I turned 18, I was paying my own college expenses while still living in his house. By 25, I was covering nearly 80% of the household bills, while he spent his money on his new wife, Barbara, and whatever get-rich-quick scheme caught his attention that month. The hospital room smelled like disinfectant and despair. A nurse who witnessed my father hit me suddenly found an excuse to leave the area. That was one of my father's talents. He had a way of making people look away. He was tall and broad, built like someone who had spent decades working construction before his convenient back injury placed him on disability. That same back never seemed to hurt when he played golf every Tuesday. Barbara stood behind him, clutching a designer purse that was not real, purchased with a credit card opened in my name. I did not know that yet, but I would soon. She laughed nervously every time my father raised his voice, a sound that felt like approval disguised as anxiety. My younger brother Jake was leaning against the doorframe, scrolling through his phone. He was 26 years old and still living in his childhood bedroom, fully supported by our father. He also owed me $5,000 from a failed cryptocurrency investment he had promised to repay in monthly installments. That promise was 14 months old. My father's girlfriend Tiffany waited in the hallway. She was 22, fresh out of beauty school, chewing gum and checking her reflection on her phone. The cost of her hair extensions was higher than my monthly car payment. She seemed completely indifferent to what was happening, or perhaps she had simply learned to ignore things when dating a man older than her own father. While my father stood there yelling about rent for a room I had been paying for since I was 18, he had no idea what I had been quietly building on the side. He thought I was just his weak daughter, working as a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized firm, barely surviving paycheck to paycheck. My boss had already called me twice while I was in the hospital, warning me that missing any more work would result in termination. 3 days in the hospital apparently exceeded the company's limit for compassion. The rent was due on the 1st of the month. It was now the 3rd. I had been unconscious on the 1st and fighting for my life on the 2nd. On the 3rd, my father wanted his money. $800 for a bedroom in a house my mother had helped pay for before she died, a house that somehow became his alone afterward. When I told him I could not pay from a hospital bed, when I suggested that my health should matter more than rent, he snapped. The slap echoed through the room. I fell sideways off the bed, tearing out my IV, blood mixed with the blood already in my mouth. The monitors began screaming, but no one came. Barbara laughed nervously. Jake glanced up briefly, smirked, and went back to his phone. Tiffany blew another bubble. My father gave me 3 days. Pay or get out. At that moment, our neighbor Mrs. Chen peeked into the room. She had brought yellow roses, my mother's favorite. She saw me on the floor, saw the blood, saw my father standing over me, and her face went pale. When she tried to help me up, My father stepped between us and told her this was family business. She left the flowers and hurried away, but the look she gave me told me she understood exactly what kind of family business this was. 3 days later, I was discharged from the hospital with painkillers and instructions to rest. My father allowed Jake to pick me up. The entire drive home, Jake complained about gas money and even held out his hand for $10 when he dropped me off. I gave him $5, knowing I needed the other $5 for the bus to physical therapy the next morning. The house felt colder when I walked in. Tiffany had moved in completely while I was gone. Her belongings were everywhere. Her yoga mat in the living room, her protein shakes in the refrigerator where my food used to be, her hair tools on my bathroom counter. She had even put a sign on the bathroom door claiming it as her personal glam room. Barbara sat at the kitchen table surrounded by paperwork. When she noticed me, she quickly covered it with a magazine, but not before I saw my social security number printed on one of the documents. She laughed nervously and asked how I was feeling. I did not answer. I went straight to my room. That was when I saw the padlock, not on my bedroom door, but on my closet. All my work clothes, my computer, and my important documents were locked inside. A note on the lock told me to see my father for the key and to pay rent first. I sat on the bed, now decorated with Tiffany's leopard print pillows, while my phone buzzed with unanswered work emails and messages from clients. I needed my computer to work from home. The computer that was locked away in a room I paid for, in a house my mother had helped buy. The next morning, I left early for physical therapy. When I returned, the locks had been changed. My key no longer worked. I stood there in pain, barely able to move my neck, holding a key that no longer belonged to anything. Tiffany eventually opened the door, wearing one of my robes. She told me I did not live there anymore and tried to close the door in my face. I forced my foot into the doorway despite the pain. Inside, I saw my father, Barbara, Jake, and one of my father's friends discussing how much they could charge a real tenant for my room. They were already planning my replacement. My brother laughed when he saw me. My father looked at me with calm satisfaction. He reminded me that I had been given 3 days, locked out and left behind. I stood in the doorway, still wearing my physical therapy clothes, still smelling faintly of antiseptic and pain, watching my family discuss how to replace me. My father's friend was explaining that $800 was far too cheap for a room that size. With a private bathroom, he said, they could easily charge $1,200 a month. They nodded along, already imagining a better tenant, someone who would appreciate the opportunity. I tried to explain that my belongings were still inside. I told them I needed my work computer, my clothes, my documents. My father listened with a blank expression and then told me I could have my things once I paid the back rent along with a security deposit for the new rental agreement he had prepared. The rent was now $1,200. While they talked, Mrs. Chen stood outside, pretending to water her garden. I could feel her watching. When my father went back inside to retrieve the paperwork, she hurried over and pressed something into my hand. It was $300 in cash and a key to her garden shed. She whispered that I could stay there for the night. Before I could respond, my father returned. Mrs. Chen stepped back immediately, pretending to ask about my recovery. My father warned her not to interfere. He threatened to report her son's food truck to the health department and invent violations if she helped me again. I saw the fear in her eyes. She went back to her garden without another word. I signed the new rental agreement with shaking hands, not because I intended to pay it, but because I needed access to my belongings. My father promised I could return the next day with the money and retrieve everything. Even as he said it, I noticed Jake wearing my college sweatshirt and Barbara carrying my laptop bag. That night, I slept in Mrs. Chen's garden shed, surrounded by fertilizer bags and gardening tools. Lying there in pain, I made a decision. But before I could act, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. I started making phone calls. The first call was to my bank. The second was to a credit agency, then another, and another. That was when I learned that multiple credit cards had been opened in my name over the past 6 months. One carried a balance of $5,000, another $3,000, another $7,000. All of them used my social security number, all of them billed to my father's address and hidden from me. In total, $15,000 of debt had been created without my knowledge. Barbara had stolen my financial future while smiling at me across the breakfast table every morning. A week later, I was officially homeless. My friend Shannon let me sleep on her couch even though her apartment was barely larger than a walk-in closet. She worked nights as a nurse, so we rarely saw each other. We left notes for one another on the coffee maker, passing like ships in the dark. One day, while everyone was out of the house, I managed to get back inside. Tiffany had posted online that they were all going to a casino. In the photo, she was wearing my mother's pearl necklace, the one that had supposedly disappeared after the funeral. The window to my old room had been loose since I was 16. I pried it open and climbed inside, my ribs screaming in protest. The room was destroyed. They had gone through everything, taken what they wanted, and left the rest scattered. My work computer was gone. But beneath a loose floorboard, I found my old laptop, the one with the cracked screen, the one I had been using for my side project. It was still there. That alone felt like a small miracle. But the real turning point came when I entered my father's office. Behind the same old lighthouse painting he had owned for 20 years was a safe. The combination had not changed. It was still my mother's birthday. Inside, I found proof of my father's greatest betrayal. There was my mother's life insurance policy, $1.5 million paid out when she died suddenly at 39. The policy clearly stated the money was to be held in trust for her children, accessible when we turned 18. Neither my brother nor I had received a single dollar. Instead, my father had purchased a new truck, a boat, and taken yearly trips to Las Vegas. There were also bank statements showing transfers to offshore accounts. And then I found something worse. A letter from my mother's doctor, dated 1 week before her death, warning her about a dangerous interaction between her heart medication and a supplement that could cause fatal heart rhythms. The supplement bottle was in the safe. It had been prescribed 2 days after that warning. My hands shook as I photographed everything: the insurance documents, the bank records, the tax filings showing my father had claimed us as dependents long after we had filed our own taxes, records of disability payments he continued to collect while working under the table. I heard the front door open. They were back early. I returned everything to the safe except one item, a USB drive labeled Backup 2019. I slipped it into my pocket just as footsteps approached the stairs. The window would not close from the inside, so I left it as it was. I grabbed the old laptop and the few clothes they had not taken and slipped out the back door as my father entered his office. That USB drive changed everything. It contained 15 years of tax evasion, fraudulent disability claims supported by videos of him golfing and lifting heavy objects, emails discussing how to hide assets, and correspondence with a lawyer about accessing trust funds using power of attorney. That evening, sitting at Shannon's tiny kitchen table, I began to plan. But first, I made one call. I called my mother's sister, Aunt Catherine, the woman my father had cut out of our lives after the funeral. She answered on the second ring. When she heard my voice, she cried. She told me she had been waiting for that call for 15 years, gathering allies and building the case. 2 weeks had passed since I was forced out of the house. The bruises on my body were finally fading from deep purple to yellow and green, which I considered progress. Shannon joked that I looked like a walking abstract painting. It was the first time I had laughed since the hospital. We settled into a strange routine. Shannon left me coffee and encouraging notes before her night shifts. I cooked dinner and left her summaries of whatever new betrayal I had uncovered that day. We barely saw each other, but we kept each other going. Aunt Catherine drove down from Boston with boxes she had been keeping hidden in her attic for years. Inside were photographs, letters, and legal documents my father thought had been destroyed. We met at a diner 2 towns over, the kind with cracked vinyl booths and coffee strong enough to strip paint. She looked older, grayer, but her eyes were the same sharp blue as my mother's. She told me something that made my blood run cold. My mother had been planning to divorce my father. She had hired a lawyer, documented his gambling problem, and gathered evidence of his first affair. The heart attack that killed her happened 2 weeks before their first court date. The lawyer was still practicing. His name was Richard Hoffman, a senior partner at Hoffman and Associates. His office smelled like old leather and injustice. He remembered my mother clearly. He remembered the case and admitted he had always been suspicious when she died, but he had never had proof. I showed him everything. The photographs from the safe, the documents from the USB drive, the credit fraud records. He studied them silently for a long time before leaning back in his chair. He told me we could bury my father. That was when I realized my father had made a critical mistake. He had kept me on his car insurance policy to get a multi-car discount. That meant I had legal access to the account, including the tracking data from the Safe Driver device installed in his vehicle. The data showed him driving daily during the same years he had claimed disability for being unable to leave his bed. While the investigation moved forward, Barbara grew bolder. She opened 3 more credit cards in my name, convinced I would not notice while dealing with homelessness and recovery. She used them to fund her essential oil business and even tried to list me in her sales network without my consent. Jake began selling my grandmother's jewelry online. The pearl necklace, the wedding ring, an Art Deco brooch that had been in our family for 4 generations. He wanted quick cash. Desperation was setting in. I also learned that my job was truly gone. A coworker secretly told me my father had called my workplace, claiming I was in drug rehabilitation and had stolen from the family. He had even sent them a photograph of me on the hospital floor after he hit me, claiming it was proof of a drug-related incident. The investigation was exhausting. Each day revealed another layer of fraud. My father had refinanced the house using a forged signature. He had emptied my mother's retirement accounts using power of attorney he granted himself after her death. He had sold her car to his friend for $1, only to buy it back later for the same amount as part of a tax scheme. The most unexpected breakthrough came from Tiffany. She called me one night, drunk and crying. She had discovered my father had another girlfriend, younger than her, barely 18. She wanted revenge and believed I could help her. I met her at a bar and listened while she talked. Tiffany had been documenting everything, planning to use it for blackmail one day. She had videos of my father counting cash from illegal construction jobs, emails coaching lawyers on how to fake disability claims, and screenshots of dating profiles where he claimed to be childless and wealthy. She gave me everything in exchange for drinks and the promise that she would get to watch him fall. With the evidence growing, I contacted the authorities. The IRS had a whistleblower program. If they recovered funds, the informant received a percentage. My father owed roughly $400,000 in unpaid taxes. The police opened an investigation into the identity theft. $15,000 across multiple cards was a felony. The Social Security Administration began reviewing his disability claims. But the most devastating case involved my mother's life insurance. The trust fund fraud alone could destroy him, and it reopened questions about her death. Richard Hoffman began filing paperwork quietly, carefully building the case. My father had no idea what was coming. He was too busy converting my old room into a rental, advertising it online as a charming space in a family home. The irony was unbearable. Mrs. Chen sent me updates. She told me about the new truck, Barbara's hair extensions, Jake being beaten over unpaid debts, Tiffany moving out and being replaced by another girl. They were spending money they did not have. The foundation was cracking. Meanwhile, the project I had been building quietly for 3 years was ready to launch. An online consulting firm that helped small businesses recover from fraud. I had already pre-sold contracts that covered my expenses for a year. While my father believed I was still broken, I was preparing to rise. The evidence was complete. The agencies were notified. The trap was set. The collapse begins. 1 month after the slap in the hospital, I sat in an office again for the first time in weeks. It was not the cubicle where my father had destroyed my reputation, but a shared workspace I rented for a day to meet my first official client. To me, it felt like a palace. My business, Phoenix Financial Recovery, had officially launched. The name was intentional. I was rising from the ashes of everything my father had tried to burn down. My first client was Mrs. Chen's nephew. His restaurant partner had embezzled $40,000. Within 3 hours, I traced the money through 6 shell companies to a casino account. He paid my $5,000 fee on the spot. While I was building my future, my father's past was unraveling. The IRS works slowly until it does not. The first sign of trouble came when my father's bank card was declined at a warehouse store, Mrs. Chen texted me immediately, using more exclamation points than I had ever seen. His accounts had been frozen. The second sign arrived as a certified letter. Jake signed for it, assuming it was something he had ordered online. When my father opened it and read the audit notice, Mrs. Chen later told me his skin turned an unnatural shade of gray and purple. The audit initially covered 5 years, but it allowed investigators to go further if fraud was found. Fraud was everywhere. Every cash job my father had taken while on disability was documented. Every hidden dollar was exposed. Every false statement on his tax returns was highlighted and explained. Barbara's world collapsed next. Police arrived while she was hosting one of her essential oil parties. A dozen suburban women watched as she was arrested for identity theft and credit fraud. She laughed nervously the entire time, even as the officers read her rights. The credit card companies acted quickly. They froze the accounts, demanded repayment, and opened their own investigations into whether my father had been involved. I had proof, but I saved it for later. Jake's situation resolved itself brutally. The people he owed money to showed up at the house the same day my father's accounts were frozen. Without his father's protection, Jake had no way out. He was forced to sell everything he owned, including my grandmother's stolen jewelry. I had already contacted the pawn shop owner. He remembered my mother and hated thieves. I bought every piece back for half of what Jake received. My father tried to save himself by renting out my old room online. I reported the listing for safety violations, the broken window, the faulty smoke detectors, the mold painted over instead of treated. A city inspector came quickly. After I mentioned that my father never pulled permits for his renovations, the inspection became extremely thorough. Tiffany's evidence proved devastating. She had recordings of my father coaching his new girlfriend on how to open credit cards in her mother's name, videos of him practicing a limp before medical appointments and walking normally afterward, messages showing him selling prescription painkillers. One discovery hit especially hard. My father had claimed Jake as a dependent on his taxes for 8 years, long after Jake had moved out and filed independently. Jake did not even know he was implicated in tax fraud. When he found out, he turned on my father immediately. The trust fund lawsuit was filed on a Wednesday. My father was served at his golf club, in front of his friends. The lawsuit demanded full repayment of the $1.5 million insurance payout, plus interest and damages. It accused him of fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and theft of trust assets. His friend Randy was not spared. Investigators visited his used car dealership. Helping someone hide money made him part of the conspiracy. His wife was furious when she learned about the hidden cash. The disability investigation moved faster than expected. 5 years of fraudulent payments added up to over $230,000, not including penalties. While all of this unfolded, my business exploded. Word spread quickly about the woman who could find hidden money. I was booked for months in advance. I raised my rates twice and still had to turn clients away. I began writing anonymously about surviving family financial abuse. The posts spread quickly. The advertising revenue alone covered my rent for a new apartment, a beautiful 2-bedroom with a balcony where Mrs. Chen could visit without fear. My father began calling. His messages shifted from threats to pleading to sobbing. I saved them all as evidence. He tried to sell assets, but everything was frozen. He tried to borrow money, but his credit was destroyed. His new girlfriend searched his name online, found my writing, and left him by text message while he was meeting with a bankruptcy attorney. The trap was no longer closing. It was slamming shut, public exposure and total ruin. 6 weeks after the slap in the hospital, everything collapsed at once. It began on a Monday morning when federal agents arrived with a seizure notice. Mrs. Chen watched from her window and called me immediately, giving me a detailed account as it unfolded. They took my father's new truck first, the one he had bought with money stolen from my mother's trust. He tried to argue that the vehicle was medically necessary for his disability. The agents simply pointed to the lifted suspension and racing stripes and moved on. They tagged everything in the house for auction: the boat, the jet skis, the home theater system, even Barbara's essential oil inventory. Barbara was not there. She was in county jail, unable to make bail because all accounts had been frozen. Her lawyer contacted me to discuss a plea deal. I told him I would consider it, knowing I would not. The trust fund lawsuit triggered a deeper investigation into my mother's death. I had not requested it, but once authorities reviewed the insurance records and suspicious timing, they reopened the case. My father panicked and attempted to destroy evidence, unaware that Tiffany had already provided investigators with the safe combination. Jake broke under pressure. Facing tax fraud charges of his own, he agreed to testify. He admitted he had known about the trust fund, helped hide assets, and assisted with the false disability claims. He also revealed something I had never known. My father had a second family in Florida. He had been sending money there for 10 years and claiming 2 additional children as dependents on his taxes. That discovery brought federal investigators into the case. The prosecutor later told me it was one of the most extensive family fraud investigations she had ever seen. The story became public after a local reporter began following the case. She interviewed neighbors, former co-workers, and even Tiffany. The headline focused on a man who had stolen from his deceased wife's trust and left his injured daughter homeless. The story spread nationally. My father tried to defend himself on local radio, claiming I was a bitter daughter seeking attention. The host played audio of my father describing his inability to walk, followed by video footage of him lifting heavy furniture the same day. The interview ended in shouting and threats, most of it censored. It became a viral clip. The auction was scheduled for a Saturday. I attended with cash, prepared to reclaim whatever pieces of my mother's life I could. The auctioneer recognized me from the news. He ensured every sentimental item went to me for the minimum bid. My mother's china, her wedding album, the rocking chair she used when we were children, $1 each. Other bidders noticed and stepped back. An older woman cried openly. She hugged me afterward and told me my mother would be proud. My father watched from his car. A restraining order prevented him from approaching me after he had appeared drunk at Shannon's apartment weeks earlier. He sat alone, watching his entire life sold off. Financial destruction came quickly. The IRS demanded $600,000, including penalties. Social Security demanded over $230,000. The trust fund judgment totaled $2.1 million. His total liability exceeded $3 million. He declared bankruptcy. Fraud judgments cannot be discharged. Barbara accepted a plea deal, 18 months in prison and full cooperation. She surrendered recordings of my father planning the fraud. Jake received probation and wage garnishment. He took a job at a car wash, the same kind of job my father used to mock. The house was foreclosed. Mrs. Chen's son purchased it at auction. He turned it into a community center for elderly immigrants. A plaque by the door honored my mother by name. The investigation into her death remained open but inconclusive. The prescription had been legal, even if suspicious. Without proof of intent, charges could not be filed. Still, everyone knew. My father became a pariah. His golf club revoked his membership. His favorite bar banned him. Even local stores treated him with quiet hostility. Every hidden asset was eventually found. Offshore accounts, cryptocurrency wallets, gold buried in the yard, all seized. I used part of the recovered funds to buy my own home, a quiet place near Mrs. Chen with a garden where I planted yellow roses. That night, sitting alone on my porch, I cried for the first time in months, not from pain, but from relief. The trial and the sentence. The criminal trial was scheduled 3 months later, but by then the damage had already been done. My father had aged rapidly. The man who once dominated every room now looked small, worn down by fear and exposure. When the court proceedings began, the list of charges was long and unforgiving. Wire fraud, mail fraud, tax evasion, conspiracy. At the state level, elder abuse charges were added after investigators uncovered evidence that he had stolen Social Security payments from my grandmother while she suffered from dementia. His lawyer tried to portray him as a grieving widower who had made poor decisions under emotional distress. The prosecutor responded with receipts, literal receipts, records of gambling trips, luxury purchases made days after my mother's funeral, and money spent on girlfriends while I took out student loans to survive. The court reviewed hospital security footage showing him striking me. They read emails where he joked about leaving me homeless. They examined trust documents proving he had stolen from his own children. When the verdict came back, it was swift. My father was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison, with no possibility of early release for the first 5. Before he was taken away, the judge allowed victim impact statements. I had practiced mine for weeks, rehearsing until I could speak without breaking. I told the court about growing up without my mother, about working multiple jobs through college while my trust fund was spent on gambling. I spoke about nights when I went hungry to pay rent, he demanded. I described the hospital room, the slap, the blood, and the fear that he might one day kill me. Then I told them about my life now, about my business that employed 12 people, about the foundation I was starting to help young women escape financial abuse, about the book deal I had signed to tell this story. I looked directly at him and said that he had tried to bury me without realizing I was a seed. The courtroom erupted in applause. The judge allowed it briefly before calling for order. My father tried to speak, but his lawyer stopped him. There was nothing left to say. Barbara was already serving her sentence. She wrote letters apologizing and asking for forgiveness. I returned them unopened. Jake's punishment forced him to change. Wage garnishment and public humiliation pushed him into real work for the first time. He attended addiction support meetings, took extra shifts, and slowly began paying back what he owed. He wrote me a letter, not asking for money, but admitting his jealousy and guilt. He apologized for not defending me at the hospital. I responded once. I told him forgiveness was not automatic, but I was watching his actions. The house where I grew up was gone, but something better replaced it. Life did not return to normal. It moved forward. Aftermath and reckoning. In the months that followed the sentencing, the consequences continued to unfold. Barbara adapted quickly to prison life. She found religion, became the chaplain's assistant, and led prayer groups with the same anxious energy she once brought to her essential oil parties. Her letters eventually stopped after my lawyer sent a formal cease and desist. The silence was a relief. Jake's transformation was slower but real. He worked 2 jobs, one at the car wash and another cleaning offices at night. His wages were garnished automatically. He paid back half of what he owed within the first year. He started dating someone he met through support meetings, someone who understood accountability and growth. He sent me a photo of them smiling at a free concert. I saved it. My business continued to grow beyond anything I had imagined. We expanded into multiple cities and recovered millions of dollars for small businesses. I hired women who had survived financial abuse, trained them, and gave them stable careers. Shannon left nursing and became my operations manager. For the first time, she slept regular hours. 6 months after the hospital incident, I stood at my mother's grave with yellow roses in my hands. I told her everything. About the trial, about the sentence, about the life I was building. For the first time since she died, I felt peace instead of grief. The foundation I started in her name awarded its first grants. 10 young women received emergency housing, legal support, and financial counseling. One of them opened a bakery that donated leftover bread to shelters. 2 months into my father's sentence, I received a call from the prison infirmary. Other inmates had learned what he had done. He had been beaten and placed into protective custody for the remainder of his sentence. I felt no satisfaction. I felt nothing. That emptiness felt like freedom. The media attention eventually faded, but strangers still approached me quietly in public places to share their own stories of family abuse. I gave them my card and told them they were not alone. My childhood home became a place of healing. Mrs. Chen's son turned it into a community center. I occasionally taught financial literacy classes there, standing in the room that once symbolized my captivity. Ashley, my father's last girlfriend, reached out to me unexpectedly. She was 18, pregnant, and abandoned. My father had convinced her to leave school and isolate herself. I connected her with the foundation, helped her find housing, and supported her through completing her education. When her daughter was born, she named her Linda. I cried. Justice did not erase the past, but it created a future, closure, and a life reclaimed. The final twist came quietly, months after everything else had settled. The IRS whistleblower payment arrived on an ordinary weekday. 30% of what they recovered from my father's tax fraud was deposited directly into my account, just over $200,000. I stared at the number for a long time, thinking about how many lives that money could change. Before I used it for anyone else, I did one thing for myself. I flew to Paris. I stayed for 2 weeks, walking along the river, eating fresh bread, standing beneath the Eiffel Tower. My mother had promised to take me there for my 16th birthday, a promise she never got the chance to keep. I sent my father a postcard from the top of the tower. The message was simple: I wished he were there. Then I crossed it out and signed my name. When I returned home, a letter was waiting from Aunt Catherine. She had been diagnosed with stage 3 cancer. I drove to Boston that night and stayed with her through chemotherapy. She had protected the truth for years. Now it was my turn to protect her. She recovered against all odds. We celebrated her remission with plans to live closer together, building a family chosen by love rather than obligation. My father was assigned a job in prison as a financial clerk, helping other inmates with their taxes. He earned a few cents an hour. Every cent was garnished for restitution. At that rate, he would never repay what he had stolen. The woman he had last been involved with turned out to be an investigator who had been gathering evidence against him independently. She sent me a short note of professional respect and a gift card. My life continued to grow. My book went into multiple printings. The foundation secured major grants. The business expanded nationally. I bought a historic home with a garden where yellow roses bloomed every spring. I stood there one evening, watching the sun set, surrounded by messages from employees, clients, and friends who had become family. 6 months after it all began, I returned to my mother's grave. I told her my father was in prison, that Barbara was serving time, that Jake was working and trying to change, that I was not just surviving, but thriving. I told her I was finally safe. I felt her presence then, not as sorrow, but as warmth. My father would spend years isolated, feared, and forgotten. I would spend mine building something meaningful, helping others escape the same kind of abuse I survived. He tried to bury me. He did not know I was a seed. And this time, the story truly ended.